All right, back here on HQ, the NFL Combine kicks off in Indy this week, and we are looking at prospects that can improve the most, improve their draft stock at the Combine. This is a list according to our NFL draft expert, Ryan Wilson. He's got Spencer Rattler on there. I know, I don't think Rick is very high on Spencer Rattler, but Ryan Wilson is. Malik Washington, and then speaking of Rick Spielman, he has his own list out there on prospects that he thinks can improve. Latu out of UCLA, JJ McCarthy, we're going to talk more about him in just a few moments. Trey Benson, running back out of FSU. Back on camera here with Tommy Tran, I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino, and Brady Quinn.
Wow, look at that.
With Rick Spielman? Now, that's not in person. That's imaginary. We would wish that was what
there, but it's funny.
Rick looking at Brady's measurables.
Look how pixelated it is. That's how old we are.
Were you mad you were under 6'4"? Because I was 6'3", 6'035", so 6'3" and a half. You were 6'3" and a quarter.
I was
3/4.
6'3" and 7/8". So
but were you mad that you were not 6'4"? I was pissed. I was mad.
It was odd only because in college they kind of round up, but in the NFL they round down. So they don't even say 6'3" and change. It's like 6'3" basically is what they say. So I didn't care so much about that. It was more about the fact that you are standing there in your underwear waiting to go get on a scale, and they measure every part of your body. I remember the hand size for quarterbacks was like a big deal, and I'd measured my hand before, so it's like, okay, that's not gonna be a problem for me. Other guys were like stretching out their hand, doing hand exercises to make sure they try to get as big of a hand measurement as they could.
Kenny Pickett did the whole massage thing leading in. Like, he went and got treatment for it and actually stretched his hand like by a ½ inch.
Wow.
It was big. And now look at him. He has problems with controlling the ball.
They regressed.
I feel like every time the Combine comes around, producer Jack just like digs out that old video of Brady, and you always have to have it in the show.
Press. You know he's going to do it at some point, so it's going to happen.
All right, so if we talk about guys that need some improvement here, J.J. McCarthy was the player that we teased, DK. What are you looking out for? Because some draft models have him maybe as a top 10, top 12 pick right now.
That, to me, is where the conversation gets interesting about J.J. McCarthy and why I think there's some real potential for the upside, because he's been somebody since the season finished. You didn't see any list really with him in the top 5, and then all of a sudden the evaluation starts and people start digging into the tape, which is limited because Jim Harbaugh didn't ask him to do very much within that system. He only had one game in a blowout against Purdue where he threw for more than 300 yards. But if you dive into it, starting to look at a situational, aspect of it, third downs, red zone, when you can kind of start seeing, okay, under crunch time, when you need to deliver, he frequently did. But I think this becomes of how high can he go? Can he break into that top 3? Could he overcome maybe a Drake May or a Jaden Daniels? I don't think anybody's going to catch Caleb Williams, but could J.J. McCarthy wow so much in a throwing session where all of a sudden he's in the same conversation as Jaden Daniels or Drake May?
Yeah, efficiency is what I think of when I think of J.J. McCarthy. You know, what he was asked to do, it wasn't like he was asked to throw the football 40+ times a game, but when he was asked to throw the football, it's critical parts of the game, like you talked about, third down, red zone, sometimes too when they need a big drive or a big play. Another thing is he's not dinking and dunking. He's running an NFL-style offense. I think that's going to be very attractive to a lot of teams, especially when they get him in those interviews. He's going to showcase well what he throws, but it's also, I think, when they get him up on the board, he talks about different run checks, things. He's going to be able to step into the NFL and run an NFL offense because his coach is now coaching the LA Chargers, and that's what he was tasked with doing during his career at Michigan.
And I think Ryan has him going inside the top 15 in his latest mock to the Raiders. This next guy, you already mentioned him, Brady, in the last segment, Joe Milton. You talked about his physical tools.
Yeah.
And does his age bother you at all? He's what, 24, 25? No.
We see that all the time with guys who are older get drafted. To me, it's more of the Adonis effect. When he walks into the room, he is gigantic. He's every bit of 6'4", 6'5", 245 pounds, and he has a howitzer for an arm. He will have the strongest arm in this draft class. He might walk into the NFL and have the strongest arm in the NFL. That's the type of arm strength you're talking about, and this effortless release, and the way he's able to throw, and he's a good athlete. So he's got all of the tools and ability. And Danny, as you know, so many of the coaches at the next level look at a player like Joe Milton and say, I can develop this guy into a superstar. And not that they necessarily shun what was, the college football level of that league, but they'll look at it and say, we feel like we can work with this guy, we can mold this guy into something special. And that's really where I think Joe Milton can improve himself over everyone else, because his arm strength alone will separate him from the rest of the quarterback class.
This was a player at the beginning of the season, I said, who could be the next Anthony Richardson? I thought it could be Joe Milton. I'm a little bit surprised he hasn't jumped as much into the conversation as Anthony Richardson Richardson did because he looks almost identical. Like from the physical standpoint, I don't think he's as good a runner as Anthony Richardson, but if he can run and put a good time down in the combine and wow, which I think he will, throwing the football, then I think some team will absolutely see him as a project they could work on, saying, oh my goodness, because everyone's looking for the vertical pass game, the deep threat. Can you put it on a line 40, 50 yards down the field? And he can absolutely do that.
I do wonder, we had some conversations about Hendon Hooker last year about the Heupel system translating to the NFL, and conversely, even maybe a Tennessee guy like Jaylen Wright, DK, talking about, Heupel system, does it translate? What are you thinking about a guy that has a lot to prove?
Well, let's not forget, too, he was at Michigan first. Then he went to Tennessee. True. So there's also the question of, like, what caused him to move was the fact that he wasn't going to play, couldn't pick up the system there. Those would be some of the questions, too, they're going to ask him about.
For sure. And then there's another player in that backfield that I was going to is Jaylen Wright, the running back, who was 5th in the SEC in rush yards. And I do think running back is a position where you do have to shine and do something really special in order to get drafted higher. He's not a first-round talent, but he could be a second round, third-round pick potentially. I think he could showcase that kind of speed, but also the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield as well. Because if you are a running back and you want to set yourself apart, you have to be able to showcase the ability to do more than just get the ball, and run off tackle. You've got to be able to do multiple things. I think Jaylen Wright, his athleticism, his ability just as a football player could impress.
Going on to a wideout, one of the only bright spots in Florida's offense this past season, Ricky Piol. I've seen some mocks, Brady, that have him going early round 2. Where do you see him landing?
He's one of those guys that in a deep wide receiver class is kind of flying under the radar right now. But when you turn on the tape and watch Ricky Piol, he's their go-to guy. He's a great route runner, a good hand-eye coordination, high points to the football well. He kind of checks every single box you're looking for. What's going to surprise people is when he runs at the combine, and he runs faster than people probably think he's going to run. So he's a guy that I think, again, the tape speaks for itself. He was their leading receiver this past year, probably the most consistent piece on their offense, as you kind of talked about there, Jacqueline. And trust me, I know you watched a lot of those games, and there was a lot of heartbreak, too.
Unfortunately, yes. They weren't great.
But he was the bright spot. He was the bright spot. And I think he's going to make you proud at the combine with the way he performs, and I think help to separate himself, too, in what is, again, a deep wide receiver class.
And Danny agrees.
Yeah, I think he's an absolute stud. I do. I like it. But, I mean, you could either go there and have to really get him out of a losing culture, or you could get somebody with a winning culture in Keon Coleman of Florida State.
Still taking shots.
But neither team made the CFP, so that's what they have in common.
Look at that. Shots fired. No, I do like Pearsall a lot. And I think these are a different conversation, because I think Keon Coleman is somebody who's kind of projected in that maybe top 4, top 5 receiver spot where he gets taken off the board. But I'm telling you, I really liked him early this season. The first time I saw him in Orlando against LSU on the field level, like when you see him in person, he does have sort of that Adonis type feel. Like you see his quads popping out from under his pads. He's got the bicep, catches everything in his sight. Did miss some time injuries, so I think the medical evaluation could be huge. But I think he's really going to impress and could possibly work his way into that top 3 receiver taken off the board potentially if he impresses at Indy.
Definitely has the ability to do that, no doubt about it. But again, for both those schools, I mean, neither really had a bowl game, right?
The jabs keep on coming, by the way.
Exactly.
But if DK gets his homer pick, Brady, you get your Notre Dame.
That's right. That's what I do.
Right?
The thing that's going to be interesting about this particular player, Cam Hart, is he's experienced. He's got good tape. I have not seen a cornerback as tall and long as him in quite some time. As far as the length and the measurables, I go back to a guy like Brandon Browner, who's about 6'4". Cam Hart's every bit of 6'3", about 210 pounds, and he's going to run what I believe to be at least a 4.4, if not a sub 4.40, and that's going to match up extremely well in the tape. So when you talk about like today's NFL, you've got to have guys who can cover these talented wide receivers. Cam Hart at Notre Dame's got the ability to do that. Played on some big stages, played extremely well, experienced, older, mature type player. So he's going to check a ton of boxes. You haven't heard his name called a ton as far as some of those top end quarterbacks. I think he's going to be one of those outliers when we look at like the size, the measurables, all those things, and you put it all together. He's going to be one of the guys that comes away as a winner at this year's Combine.
Love it. The one trend I've noticed in the past decade of NFL and college football is length. Like long, lanky, tall. It's a trend that's taking place because in both sides of the ball.
I was literally on campus. I ran into him and I looked at him. I was like, good heavens! Like he's even big. Like it was kind of like Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton might be listed at like 6'4" for the Baltimore Ravens. He looks longer than that, and it's an incredibly deceiving thing. But when you get out there on the football field, you feel like as a quarterback, I don't have much of a window to throw to because that guy's going to take away pretty much every spot I can throw to a receiver, especially especially if they're not taller than the guy is.
Brady, Danny, certainly appreciate it. Want to remind everybody not only about the Combine, but the key NFL dates. And you gave me an idea, though, so maybe later this week we talk about defensive backs that are taller than their wide receivers, like Sauce Gardner you see on NFL Sundays, taller, and that length impacting some of the elite wide receivers in the league. But again, we're in franchise tag mode season. If you missed the news from earlier today, T. Higgins getting that tag in Cincy.